All right, guys, you have reached the last day of this week for e-learning. So far this week, we have gone over the notes for this section, like the classification system, cladograms, evolutionary relationships, and grouping and figuring out who's related to one another and how closely related they are. We've made it to the end. This was the second big homework assignment that I had for you guys for this week. So we're going to go ahead, look through it, determine how you can do that. And hopefully this makes things a lot easier for you guys. Oh, there's my mouse. As you're doing this, if you haven't completed it yet. So let's go ahead and start. This is, of course, the Domains, Kingdoms, and Classification worksheet. This is a Word document, and you guys on your Chromebooks do not have Word. So what I want you to do is make a copy of this. You can just highlight it, and you should be able to make, just right-click, copy the whole thing into the Google Doc. It's basically like Word document for Google. And then you just fill it in, just like I'm going to do right now. So if you look here, first part is about the domains of living things. We talked about that yesterday. So all organisms belong to one of three domains, depending on their characteristics. A domain is the most inclusive taxonomic category. A single domain can contain one or more kingdoms. So we're going to fill in the table below. For the first one, we've just got bacteria. That's our domain. And let's look at some characteristics of bacteria. Well, they are prokaryotes, and they are single-celled. Single-celled and prokaryote, they go hand in hand. Always going to be single-celled. Bacteria also have cell walls made of peptidoglycan. Now, you don't need to know the peptidoglycan part, but you do need to know that they have cell walls. Most prokaryotes do. And lastly, let's say something about where they live. Bacteria basically live everywhere. So they can be found anywhere on Earth. Most anywhere. Let's put most in there. You find it in the air. You find it in the dirt. You find it in the bottom of the ocean. You find it on your skin, inside your body. Bacteria can be found everywhere. Now, the kingdom included in this domain is basically just eubacteria. If you have difficulty figuring that out, well, it kind of tells you this stuff in the chart below. So you've got your key right here in front of you. Our second one, the archaeobacteria, is going to look very similar to bacteria, mainly because they have very similar characteristics. So archaeobacteria, they are prokaryotes. Once again, prokaryote and single-celled go hand in hand, so they're also single-celled. They have cell walls, but they aren't made of peptidoglycan. Without peptidoglycan. And the interesting things about these is that they are found, in extreme environments. They're extremophiles. So what we're going to say is extremophiles. So they live in extreme environments. Now, there's also just one kingdom here. That is archaeobacteria. And lastly, we've got our domain eukarya. These are eukaryotes. They can be single-celled or multicellular. So there's going to be some types of eukaryotes that are just little single cells like protists, and some types of fungi There's also going to be multicellular ones, like also some protists, animals, plants, and a lot of fungi as well. So they can be all over the place, really. We're not going to include the cell wall part because some have cell walls, others don't. But I'm going to say an interesting thing about eukarya, all of the complex life on Earth. So that's going to be the things that we like have organs, and eukaryote cells by just their very nature are a lot more complicated. They've got organelles, they've got all kinds of things that make them much more complex than bacteria. So let's go ahead. Let's look at what our kingdoms are for this particular thing. We've got 4 different kingdoms. We've got Protista. We've got fungi. We've got Plantae. And lastly, Animalia. So we've got protists, fungus, plants, and animals. Those are the 4 kingdoms. Let's move it on down. Okay, yeah, you guys can see this. So basically we're supposed to use figure 18-3 to kind of answer some of these. So let's use this to our advantage and try to get a heads up on this. According to the figures, what is the main difference between the domain bacteria and the domain archaea? Well, it's got to be where they live, right? Because bacteria, they kind of live everywhere, but they can't really live in these extreme environments. I mean, it doesn't really say. I guess you can just say their main difference are the cell walls. The cell wall composition. I'm actually going to put a little dash mark here. Cell wall composition. At least that's what the chart itself says. But I'm also going to add where they live, because archaea are found in extreme environments. So that's kind of like the main difference between them. Other than that, they're very similar to one another. But that's also a pretty big one because one lives in like thermal vents on the bottom of the ocean or in lava pools or hot springs or really salty places that nothing else can survive. And the other is just, found everywhere else. Number 3, if you know an organism has a cell wall and is a multicellular, so it's complex life, and is a multicellular autotroph. Autotroph means that it makes its own food. Could you use figure 18-3 to determine the kingdom to which it belongs? Well, let's go ahead and take a look and see if we could figure that out. Multicellular. That gives us a dead giveaway. We're going to find this in domain eukarya because only eukaryotes can be multicellular. Autotroph. We've got to find, so eukaryote. Let's see, is there anyone that says an autotroph? Protista says it's an autotroph or heterotroph. Okay. And Plantae, they are autotrophs. So the last thing we need is find out if it has cell walls. Oh, we've got cell walls of cellulose in some, and some have chloroplasts. And some over here in the plant section, Plantae, they have cell walls of cellulose and chloroplast. So it looks like Protista and Plantae are very similar to one another. So, could we exactly determine which kingdom it belongs? I would say, oh, is it going to let me go down here? Okay. I'm going to say, no. No. Because, and actually I'm going to, yeah. No. And that reasoning is there are 2 kingdoms that fit all of those descriptions. And you know what I'm going to do, guys? I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of my answers in red for you so that you can see what these answers are. I should have done that from the beginning. But it should make it a little bit easier. Okay. You don't have to do this. I mean, I'll be able to see. So, yeah. So, number 4. If you're told only that an organism is unicellular and has chloroplasts and a nucleus, could you use figure 18-3 to determine the kingdom to which it belongs? Why or why not? Unicellular, has chloroplast and a nucleus. I would say, yes, you could. Down here, if you see this, we've got autotrophs or heterotrophs, autotrophs or heterotrophs. But the main key here is methanogens and halophiles. These are things that feed on methane. These things are things that live in very salty environments. Except chloroplasts are only found in these. So you still could. I would say yes, you would be able to figure that out. And let's look at exactly why. There's only one of the kingdoms in eukarya that's going to have a nucleus. Nucleus means you are eukaryote. And if you've got chloroplasts and you're single cellular, you have to be a protist. Only the protists have a nucleus and are single celled. So pretty clear to me that it has to be that you can figure it out using that. You could not in number 3. It wasn't as descriptive as it could be. Let's look at our taxonomy practice. So the next part of this. For the first one, define a species. We haven't really talked about a lot of this, but I'm going to define a species. We can skip the 4 ways that new species can develop, but that mainly it's going to be some kind of isolation from one another, like geographic isolation, time, like a time separation. So one might reproduce at night, one might reproduce during the day. There's just a few different ways that there can be a separation that'll make a new species. But define a species, that should be pretty easy. I would say a population. Let's go ahead and make it so it types in red. Population of organisms that can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. Meaning their babies can have babies. And their babies can have babies. So they can have babies that have babies. Essentially is what this is saying. So we're going to skip number 2. list the 4 ways species can develop. I did not go over that in class. Define taxonomy. That should be an easy one. We did talk about this early on in the class or in this week's notes. So taxonomy is a I'm just going to say a method of classifying organisms into different categories. So, pretty simple description here. I'm not going for anything crazy. Who is known as the father of taxonomy? If you remember, that was old Carolus Linnaeus. I think that's spelled whatever. Described by nomial nomenclature, that was the 2-part naming system that Linnaeus came up with. So there's 2 names. There's the genus and the species. For living things. What 2 parts constitute a scientific name? I kind of just said it, but it is the genus and the species name. Remember, genus is just similar species. The species is specific to one type of organism. If your name were a scientific name, which part would be the genus name? That would be your first name, right? Because the genus always comes before the species. So, our first name would be our genus name. And number 8, which part would be the species identifier? That would be your last name. Because the second name is the species name. Now, of course, where this kind of messes up is it doesn't take middle names into account. So we're just gonna forget that part. All right. Number 9. Number the major classification groups, taxa, in order from the most specific to the least specific. So the least generalized to the most generalized. So basically, like the song that I did in class, we're going in the exact opposite direction. So the most specific one would be the species. After that, we get a little bit more general, and we go to a genus. Species, genus, I believe it's family. Yeah, it is family next. Class order, family. Yep. So the order is the next. Class is a little bit more broad than that. Phylum. And finally, we've got the kingdom. So you go from more specific to the least specific, the one that includes the most different types of organisms. Says circle the scientific name that is least like the other 2. Okay. Circle the scientific name that is least like the other 2. Oh. So, okay. Number 10. We're just going to highlight these, so it makes it a little bit easier. In number 10, we've got 3 names. We've got Canis familiaris, Canis lupus, and then Felis domesticus. This one's pretty easy. Which one is least like the other 2? Well, there's only one that has a different genus name. It is Felis domesticus. So that's the domesticated cat. There we go. Highlight it. Number 11, and we're going to follow the same type of thing. We've got Felis domesticus, Mus domesticus, or Mus domesticus, and Felis concolor. I hope you see where I'm going with this. There's one that has a different genus name. That is Mus domesticus. Let me highlight, por favor. There we go. So here, basically, to find the one that is least like the other two, you have to find the one that has a different genus name. The first name is different. Last two, it says use the table to answer the questions that follow. We've got kingdom, family, class, order, family, genus, species, and then our common name. So we can go down the list and see which two are more like the other based on which family they are in. Or not family, all of the different categories, all the different taxa. Number 12 says, how does this table indicate that a cat is more closely related to a bobcat than a ferret? So we got a ferret right here, and we've got the bobcat right here. So this cat, boom, the domestic cat, is more closely related to this bobcat than it is to a ferret. Well, if we go up the list, the separation between the ferret and the domestic cat starts all the way up here in the family name. So the domestic cat shares the same family as the bobcat, and it shares the same genus as the bobcat. That's a dead giveaway that those two are more closely related. So I would say the bobcat and the domestic cat share the same family and genus name, while the cat and the ferret do not. So they're just more different to each other than the bobcat and the cat are. Number 13 says, which two animals are most closely related? And so blank and blank, and how do you know? Well, it kind of just told us. The domestic cat and the bobcat are the most closely related because, well, they share all the way down to their genus name. They're basically just different on a specific species level. So I'm going to say the cat and the bobcat. How do you know? They share taxa all the way down to the species level. That is not how you spell species. All right. All the way down to the species level. So, boom. Dead giveaway. That's what it is. This video has gone on kind of long, but as you can see, hopefully it was worth it. This is how I would go through and answer these different questions. Of course, you may have a difference in opinion, but I would go ahead and go with these maybe. So hopefully this helps you guys, and I will see you next week. See you.